appreciate and enjoy and explore what Malawian culture looks like within the urban context, as well as to explore the narratives that make Malawi unique. My name is Sean, and I'm going to be your host tonight, kind of like your tour guide through this experience, and describe myself in the same way that I think many of you would describe yourself. I describe myself as an Afro-Ewagian. And by that, I simply mean the Afro describes that I am very proud of my African heritage in general, but Malawian in particular. The way in the word represents that, for better or worse, there's been a lot of Western influence in my life, as has been in many people's lives here in the city. But at the same time, I'm also young, and many of you here are from the youthful generation, and so one of the things that happens to all of us here in the urban context is we struggle to figure out how all of these pieces fit together, and Pamoto is an opportunity for us to explore that identity together. So what I would love to do right now is to invite you all to stand for our national anthem.
Freedom ever, let us all unite to build up Malawi. With our love, our zeal and loyalty, bringing our best to her. In time of war or in time of peace, one purpose and one goal. Men and women serving selflessly, oh, to build up Malawi.
Now you're thinking, what the heck? That wasn't the national anthem. That's not what I sing. Google it, people. Google it. The national anthem has 3 verses to it, and that is the 3rd verse. Badangu Kala. Long ago, there was a village, and in this village lived God with all the animals that he had made. God was in existence as well as the animals, and they were eternal. In fact, in this village, God had his own hut, his own house, a thatched house, and he lived in this village along with all the animals. And they lived in perfect harmony and peace, and it was beautiful, a beautiful eternal community. Of all the creatures in existence at the time, the wisest was a creature named Nanzigambe, the chameleon. He was the wisest of them all. And not only was he known for his wisdom, but Nanzigambe was also known for his skills in fishing. And just beyond the village that all the animals lived in with God, Nanzigambe would go and fish because there were these mystical rivers that passed by the village. One of the beautiful things about the village was the closeness between the earth and the sky. Because you see, in those days, in the beginning, the sky and the earth were so close together. From a distance, they even looked like they touched. And so Nanzikambe would crawl out of his hut in the middle of this village, and he would be skipping along to the mystical rivers, and he would be greeting people along the way. What up, monkey? What it do, dog? On his way to the mystical rivers. And then he would get there and he would pull out his net, his fishing net, and he would throw it into the rivers to see if he could catch something. Because you see, the rivers were always teeming with all manner of fish and creatures. And Nanzikambe would cast his net in there, and as he's casting his net, he would be singing. Loved singing this creature. Viko e ndonda nchecherere kumanika ae ndonda nchecherere. As he's putting his net down in the river in the places where he felt there would be something to catch. Viko e ndonda nchecherere kumanika ae ndonda nchecherere. And then once he's done putting the net in the river, he would leave to go and attend to his other duties, because he was a busy guy, this one. And then he would come back at the end of the day to see what he had caught, and he would pull his net back. And then he would bring it over by the riverbank and see what he caught. And then he would pick out the good stuff and keep it to go into the village to share with the others, and then he would throw the bad stuff away. But one day, one particular week, Nanzikambe had a pretty bad fishing experience, because he went through his usual routine, greeting the animals in the village, and then he went down to the mystical rivers, and he did his usual routine, throwing his net back in the river, singing, Viko e ndonda nchecherere kumanika ae ndonda nchecherere. And then he went about his business and came back at the end of the day and pulled his net out of the river, and lo and behold, in his net was nothing. And Nanzikambe wondered, how can this be? The river is always teeming with the creatures of all kinds, all shapes and colors. I wonder what spooked them. Day one went. He said, okay, well, some days are better than others. Some days you're the pigeon, and other days you're the statue. I guess I was the statue today. And he went home. Came back the next morning, hopeful that he would catch something this time. So he throws his net in the river, singing as ever. Viko endonda checherere kumanika endonda checherere. And then he went about his business and came back at the end of the day and pulled his net out of the river. And lo and behold, there in the net was nothing. And then went home. On the third day, he wasn't singing as loudly because he is discouraged now. He is despondent. And so he's not even singing all the lyrics. He's just going, Vigo, Ndonda, Vigo, Ndonda, Vigo, Ndonda. And then he went about his business and came back that evening to see if he had caught something. And he was pulling that thing, expecting to find nothing, and that's when it happened. He felt something catch his net, and he knew he had caught something, and excitement filled his heart, and the volume went up. Vigo, Ndonda, Vigo, Ndonda. And he's pulling this thing, and he's pulling it out of the water, expecting to see what it was. And then when he was looking at it at the bank of the river, that's when he noticed it. Two creatures he had never seen before. Hairless creatures with 4 limbs, with 2 eyes staring at him. And Nanzikambe thought, what are these? These can't be good. These can't be edible. And so being the wise creature that he was, he thought, I'll get rid of them. This can't be safe. And the two creatures pleaded with Nanzikambe, please do not harm us. And so Nanzikambe thought, they even talk. Maybe I should go back in the village and ask God, since he lives with us. And so he grabbed these two creatures and went back into the village and presented them to God. And God said, oh, do no harm to these creatures. In fact, I am calling an assembly. And so he called all the creatures in the sky, all the creatures on the land, and all the creatures in the water to a meeting and told them all there was to know about these two creatures. And told them they must not be harmed. They must be allowed to flourish in our eternal community. I will call this one Muntu Wamamuna. And this one I will call Muntu Wankazi. Man and woman. And so they grew up in this eternal community with God and the animals. But as they got older and grew stronger and learned things quickly, they started to explore and wanting to do things that the animals weren't doing. And so they figured out that, some animals are tasty. Because one of them, you see, was sleeping at night and an ant fell in his mouth and he chewed it by accident and the protein was like, it's like, oh, some of these animals actually taste good. So they started hunting the animals. And the animals grew afraid of man and woman. And as a result, they started wondering how long this could go on. One day, they pleaded with them, you can't go on like this. This is not good. But they would not listen because man and woman were no longer the teachable and humble creatures they were when they came into the community. And so one day, the man, it's always the man, he's playing with sticks, rubbing them together, rubbing them quickly, quicker and quicker, and suddenly the animals gather, wondering what he's doing, and then they noticed the thing they had never seen before, a cloud rising from the sticks with a very strange smell. And the animals said, that can't be good, you better stop that. But the man didn't. In fact, he gathered more sticks. And then, kaboom, there was that flame. And it burned him. And then he dropped the sticks, and it fell on the ground close to the dry grass, and he caught on fire. And suddenly the fire became an inferno, and all of the houses in the village were set ablaze, including the thatched house that God lived in. And Nanzikambe got out of the way of the flames just in time and climbed up a tree and just wept and wept and wept and wept over the village. He wept so much his eyes swelled up, and they have never gone down ever again. And God at that time had been in the village for so long and was so old, he could not get out of the village, out of the fires quick enough. In fact, the fire would have burned God to ashes if it was not for the spider who spun a web that God used to climb out of the village into the heavens. And as God was climbing out of the earth, he accidentally caught his foot on the sky and pulled it. And that's how it was separated from the earth. And God went to live in the heavens. And while he was there, God swore that from now on, when men and women die, they will come up to the heavens where they will be my slaves.
It's a hard thing being different. And when your difference is something that is you have no control over, it's even worse. In a community where children were thought as a blessing, that should be sought after and cherished above all, there was one woman that saw this difference. After years of trying, she and her husband finally spoke the truth and said they could not have children. So life went on, but not for her. She wondered if her husband was truly happy to live without children. She longingly looked at her neighbor's children who were playing in the yard, and she heard the women in the village that would whisper, "There goes that barren woman. Maybe her husband should just find another wife." Finally, fed up and desperate for a baby, the woman got up and she went looking for an ancient healer in the southern province. This healer was indeed as powerful as she had heard, because as soon as she arrived, he came to her and brought forth a baby and gave her this baby. Exclaiming for joy, she opened her arms and received this little baby. It was a baby girl, and she drew that little bundle close to her. But this ancient healer told her, "Because this child was made from the dust and the tears from your need, she must never be exposed to the rain. If she is, she will return to the dust from which she was made." Deciding to call her Kamdoti, the woman and her husband, they said they would be honest with her from the very beginning. They would have to be completely, totally honest with her and tell her where she came from, and also tell her what would happen if she was ever caught in the rain. As she grew older, they decided to make it a game. And so, when Mom saw clouds in the sky that foretold of rain, she started singing. And she would sing to her daughter and say, "Kamdo tiwe tawamvula, kamdo tiwe tawamvula." And her daughter, whether she was playing with the neighbors or she was walking with her father, would answer back, "Tawamvula, tawamvula." So can we do that together tonight? All you have to do is answer, "Tawamvula, kamdo tiwe, kamdo tiwe, mananga, kamdo tiwe." Now, as Kamdoti grew older, this little arrangement became less of a game and more of Mom controlling everything. I mean, who ever heard of a healer making a baby from the dust, from rain? I mean, from what is going on? She wanted to be with her friends. All her friends were playing in the rain. Nothing happened to them. And so the song took on a less jovial turn. Mom would sing out, "Kamdo tiwe, kamdo tiwe." But you know what? She would answer and mumble angrily, "Tawamvula, tawamvula, kamdo tiwe, tawamvula, kamdo tiwe, tawamvula." But one day, now a teenager, Kamdoti was invited to hang out with her friends. But Mom always said, "Please, my daughter, don't wander off too far. You don't want to go where you cannot hear my voice." But it had rained the previous weeks, and she had been talking with this cute boy in the neighborhood. But Mom had started singing just when things got interesting. She was fed up with listening to Mom making all these rules about coming back home when the rain comes. I mean, what was she? She was not going to melt. What was she, the wicked witch of the West? So, Kamdoti went with her friends and kept going, until she was in a part of the village that she had never been before. She was having so much fun that she'd not even noticed the clouds turning dark. And when she felt that first drop on her skin, she brushed it aside and continued playing and laughing. Then it started to shower, and a niggling sense of discomfort began to come in. Then her breathing got shallower. What was going on? Was she about to have a panic attack? What was this weird feeling? At that, she turned to her friends and said, I need to get home. Back at home, Mom saw the darkening of the clouds, and of course she began to sing, Kamdo Tiwe, Kamdo Tiwe. When she didn't hear a response, she frowned but thought, Kamdo Tiwe was just, smarting from the shouting they had done in the morning. But when it started to drizzle and there was still no response, she started to panic. Something was wrong. She ran into the village and she started singing loudly, Kamdo Tiwe, Kamdo Tiwe. No response. Then she started singing even faster and faster, Kamdo Tiwe, Kamdo Tiwe, Kamdo Tiwe. Finally, she heard a faint response in the wind. Tawamfula. Spurred on by a strength only a mother would know, she ran to her daughter. Kamdo Tiwe. Tawamfula. And she caught her daughter just as as she was falling on the ground, barely singing, Tawamfula. Too late, Kamdoti now saw that her mother had told her the truth. I'm sorry, Mom, was all she got to say before the torrent washed her away.
I'm glad to see that the young generation in the country are talking about important things that need to be done. I'd really like to see this move beyond just talking, and I think people need to be prepared to put themselves out and actually take action. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of really engaging and understanding the dynamics as to why we are where we are today and how we get ourselves out of this rut, as was mentioned earlier.
Poetry in Africa is more than the coffin maker standing up in church asking God to bless his business. It's more than dashikis and different dialects. It directs us to different paths. It's more deeply rooted than the roots of a baobab tree, deeply rooted in our different family trees. We are grafted branches of each other. We are family. Uprooted up at the uprisings, the divisions of the pie by different buyers in a faraway country, never the baker, never the givers, always the takers. So African poems are taking back their land. African poems are neither held together at the roots of the hair of a dreadlocked man speaking patois, telling us to go to freedom one step at a time like this was a High School Musical. African poems are not looking for murals of better lives. Most of our fathers made it from villages and not ghettos. African poems are not always about addressing selfish politicians who steal from a part of a nation where a portion of love and a portion of the concoction of trust should have been brewed together. African poems are more than tea. African poems are more than mirrors asking them to look at themselves and see what they have become. African poems are also not always about addressing false prophets that take advantage of people's faith. They rebuke them. And people who go to false prophets looking for things that they did not work for but wanted to hear, so receive these words. African poems, no fear, war drums, blood, black folk selling of black skin to white folk in exchange for salt. It's more than just mere talk. It walks the walk. It has a certain swag that knows of pain, the certainty of loss, of self-discovery. African poems know love and redemption by God. African poems speak to big-bellied children with malnourished. It gives them hope. African poems also rebuke big-bellied men with malnourished minds trying to take advantage of little girls. African poems don't come with the customary fly these days, sticking to the nose of the child, or the Bono concert asking you to save it, or the PSI ad asking you to save yourselves. African poems sometimes dare to say nigger like they were sitting on Obadiah's front porch in Memphis, drinking tea with sugar from the plantations that hold their ancestors' bodies, thinking about the ships that carried their bodies there. They talk to Malcolm X and Dr. King too. They try to have dreams. They preserve the stories of our kings. They too are weapons that gather the feathers of fallen angels. African poems are runways for the African child to fly.
I love that we are talking about stories that I never got to learn, and that's a thing. Like, personally, I'm trying to learn more about African journal, but also about Malawian journal. So I love that I learned something new that is part of me that I didn't know.
We're just talking just right now of Rose Chiwambo and her story. And when she met those chiefs, what made a Malawian woman in 1950, who's married to a civil servant, question the system? And not just question the system, and do something about the system. Because we're good at talking about what's wrong with our society, what's wrong with our country, but we're not very good at doing. And what is it about Rose? That's what I picked from this. What was it that made this housewife from 1950s Malawi actually form a league, a pressure group, and change things? What is it about her? Because I have this theory about us as Malawians. And it's my theory. Everybody's welcome to question it. But it's my theory, which is that we're conflict averse. We don't want to confront anything. We always take the middle road. I found this out about myself when I was studying in a country foreign to here, that if two people were having an argument and I was a third person, if the first person raised a point, I would agree with them and say, yeah, I see your point. And the second person would give a counterpoint, which I didn't agree with per se, but not wanting to upset them, I would always say, I see the sense of what you're saying. Even if I don't see the sense of what they're saying, and I totally think it's rubbish, I would say, I see your point, which is Malawian to do. And my theory is because I think everybody who settled in the country we call now Malawi ran away from a more superior grouping of people. So if you want to say we are the conflict averse people and we all came and collected here, and how can we change that so that we become the Rose of Chiwambos of today? Because I kind of feel that's the only way we can change our narrative.
To a large extent, Malawians are very amicable people. We're actually known as the warm heart of Africa, and that's not for nothing. You know, you look around the African continent, and we're one of the countries that have been in peace since independence. So, on the one hand, we avert conflict, and we live in peace. On the other hand, we avert conflict to the point where we don't move forward. We stand still, and we accept anything that is happening.
I think we're a nation of cowards, to be honest. But what's needed, and when you look at the story of Rose, what stands out the most is a subjective decision to a collective problem, which is something that we lack a lot. We like to be in the collective. We like to be in the squad, in a crew, in a crowd. If a decision has to be made, we have to go consult and talk to other people and try to decide. And that's the difference with Rose. She made a decision on her own, based on her own perspectives, based on her own reactions, her own emotions, based on her own experience. She was a mother, so she understood the pain of bringing a child into this world and raising him up, only to be subjectified. So I believe we need to have subjective decision making, where you make decisions not out of a selfish heart, but an understanding that this problem might affect the collective, but it also first affects me as a person. I think that's the first step in making decisions that are constructive, not just for development, but even for the person to fulfill themselves in the society that they're living in.
Which brings me to some point which I like to touch on, which is the knowledge that a problem, yes, it might affect the collective, but it really affects you. Which, if you hear from the Kandoti story, it's something that it's a minor point about it, but I've always picked up. Our societies think that everybody must have a child. Every single person has to have a child. Like, this country cannot take all the children that everybody can have. It's just a fact. And with the way our population is growing, it might be a collective problem, but it's also everybody who's sitting here's problem. And it's something that, like, as a young person who's sitting here, in case you haven't thought about this, I want you to start thinking about it, because it's your problem. Because the way this population is growing, by 2035, we're going to be 50 million. And this space is not good enough for 50 million people. And the truth is, everybody who's here is elite. The majority of these 50 million people are not going to be elite. They're going to come take your elite stuff. Because they're going to ask, why does he have, or why does she have, why do not? And so they're going to take either physically or by your tax. Because you pay for their schools, you pay for their hospitals, you pay for their infrastructure, you pay for everything in one way or another. So it's a collective problem, but it will be your individual problem. Because the elders we have now, in 20 years' time, most of them will be gone. Sorry to say, it's just biology. It's how it works. It's just how it works. But you're 20, most likely you'll be 40. You're still very young. And we left Zaire, we left South Africa, we left Tanzania, Mozambique to come and settle here. In 20 years' time, we can't leave again, all of us. Zaire or South Africa or Congo will not take us back. So we have to sort this out. You have to sort it out, start making it work here.
I've realized, having experienced sort of other cultures, I think I need to get out of my comfort zone and face this head on and question some things.
In a time much like our own, in a land not so far away from this one, lived a vibrant community of animals. They, much like us, oriented their sense of self from that age-old rhythm we now call Ubuntu. I am because we are. That is to say, in the animal kingdom of Maravi, relationship was everything. It was understood that if one excels, all excel. And if the many are succeeding, no one must be left behind. Now, as you and I know, no society is ever just one thing or just one way. There is always texture and variety. In the Maravi kingdom, that different texture was Speedy the hare. Poor misunderstood Speedy. He stuck out like a sore thumb in a community that valued connection over time and relationality over efficiency. Unfortunately, his quick wit and fast pace quickly earned him the reputation of being rude and unwilling to be like everybody else. In fact, it was not uncommon to hear whispers like, "Who does he think he is running around like that?" And you know that Speedy has an illness, right? His mother was bewitched by the female Fisi when he was in her womb. Speedy only added fuel to the fire by being seemingly oblivious to the fact that his speed was a cause of concern in his community. What was worse, according to his aunties and uncles, was that he appeared to disregard any messages of concern passed along to him. Now, no one knows whether it was his ignorance or his arrogance that led to this fateful encounter. But the day came when Speedy Kalulu finally faced the reality of his difference. It was harvesting season in an animal Maravi, and parties were in full swing, as it had been a particularly fruitful year. One day, Speedy went to one of these gatherings, and Speedy, never afraid to be himself, was whizzing back and forth between friends and making people laugh. But, as was Speedy's custom, before the party had even properly started, some said, he started to say his goodbyes, citing a deadline and a business meeting as a reason for his quick departure. And so the mocking began. Why are you always in a hurry, Speedy? It must be true what they say about you. There is a curse on you. Because how can you leave all this food behind? Someone took it even further and said, Speedy Kalulu, how do you expect to get married one day when you can't even sit and talk to these beautiful, gorgeous women? Just then, a female voice spoke up from the doorway. How about a bet, Speedy? I bet you that I can beat you in a race. His attention immediately caught by his two favorite things, speed and winning. Speedy whipped around to locate the source of the voice. What he saw at first stunned him and then made him double up in laughter. You, he said, you want to race me, Fulu? What is this, a joke? Fulu, ever graceful, chuckled along with him and said, only to you, Speedy. But I'm serious. I'll tell you what. If you win the race, if you win the race, then you can go. In fact, we won't even escort you to the door in case we slow you down. In addition to that, she said, if you win the race, we promise to never, ever give you grief about your speed again. Done, Speedy quickly interjected. Wait, Fulu said. But if I win, Speedy laughed. That's not going to happen. If I win, Fulu repeated emphatically, you have to stay and buy her a drink tomorrow, shouted a loudmouthed friend. What? This is not that kind of a bet, screamed Fulu, but was quickly drowned out by the roars of approval in the room. Speedy, feeling quite positive about the outcome of this race, laughingly agreed. All right, Fulu, are you ready to lose? Speedy quipped. Save your energy, Speedy. You're going to need it to wipe that smirk off your face when you lose, retorted Fulu. Soon enough, a course had been marked out by an enthusiastic onlooker. And at the shout of go, Speedy was first off the starting line. He was fast outpacing Fulu when a thought occurred to him. Of course he was going to win. He was racing against a tortoise. There was no way that even if he did win this race, anyone was ever going to adhere to the terms. If he really wanted the other animals to stop ridiculing him, he was going to have to do something incredible. He was going to have to show them how useful speed and efficiency could be. Okay, this will have to be something obvious, he thought. I should multitask. I'll dance for a bit, dash out and make a meeting with the cheetahs to pitch a potential taxi service idea, come back and let Fulu pass me, and then win this properly by passing her just before the finish line. So Speedy slowed down and turned to the dance floor. Some, seeing this as Speedy clearly joking with Fulu, followed him off the course and joined him on the dance floor and danced the night away. After dancing with a few friends, he dashed out of the door and closed the deal with the cheaters. He then made his way back to the race, and seeing that Fulu was 2/3 of the way done, decided to up the ante by walking next to Fulu until just before the finishing line. Now, walking next to Fulu, he turned to her and asked, Fulu, what made you decide to challenge me? You and I are built completely different. You don't think you can win this race based on biology alone, do you? Fulu laughed to herself and said, Oh, Kalulu, I am already winning this race and you don't even know it. Intrigued by this statement, Speedy asked, You are winning? How? I just outpaced you, danced with a bunch of people, finished a business meeting, and came back to the race, and you're still running. His voice faded off as he saw the look on Fulu's face. Wait, that was your plan all along? To keep me here? Why? Fulu chuckled and said, I know things are a bit slow here in Maravi, Speedy, that we are more relational than time-oriented. But what you don't seem to see is that there doesn't seem to be such a huge conflict between the two things. You, Speedy, can still be fast and efficient and relate better to people. You just showed that today. You got everything done that you needed doing and still had fun with your friends at the party. Now at the finish line, Speedy stopped to ponder this. Fulu turned to him. You need to keep moving if you're planning to winning on this race, Speedy. You know what, Fulu? You were right. You have already won the race. And so it was thus that Fulu the tortoise won the race against Speedy the hare. But to Speedy, this was not just the day that the hare lost to the tortoise. This was the day he found his place in Maravi.
This program was proudly sponsored by Steers at Independence Drive, home to the best ribs in the country.